Okay, in this tutorial we're going to be looking at creating kind of stamps for ZBrush. So this is where you can apply things like kind of nuts and bolts and screw holes and things like that onto your meshes. So just to kind of show you how this works, first of all, I want you to drag Rect from here, and just select, say, this alpha. You should probably be able to find it in your list down here. And just try dragging onto your mesh. You can subdivide it a few times if you need to. So you can see what it does. You can just stamp straight on. If you try selecting drag dot, then it will just base it on kind of like the size of your model. So. Okay, so obviously you can import your own alphas by coming over here and going to import, but what about if you want to kind of sculpt something in ZBrush? So if you press the comma key, that will bring up your list of tools. Plane template. There you go, it's just in project over here, and just select plane. Okay, so just like you would kind of, just turn off the floor there, just like you kind of do in Photoshop, you're almost kind of like working on an image here, and it's just a flat plane in this case. Now we want to divide, and now when I divide here, we want to actually make sure that smooth is turned off, so we maintain the exact square shape of this, since it's going to be a square alpha. So if we just divide this, let's take it up to, say, 1.5 million. I'm just going to put this back to the kind of default colours as well. Okay, so let's just turn this alpha off. We'll go to freehand on here. Now obviously we can just kind of paint as we see fit. But what we're going to do here, we're actually going to use Radial Symmetry to make a kind of button type thing. Now, as you can see straight away, your symmetry isn't set correctly, so on radial just make sure you're on the Z axis, and then we'll leave the radial count down for now just to show you. Okay then, so then start trying to paint with your brush. First of all, I've got my brush size too large. Let's just try again with something like that. Now you can see it creates this, just kind of doing that has created this kind of weird effect here. And the reason it's done that is because we don't have enough count in our radial symmetry. So if we just increase that a bit, let's kind of move it around, you can get that nice kind of flat area to it. Now something that can be quite good to do actually when you're creating these is to actually kind of aim your alpha to have a kind of border around it like this. So you'll see why. It's basically because we might want it to fade out for when we stamp it on. Again, this will become a bit kind of clearer later. The first thing I want you to do is just create, just something like that in the center. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is try and extrude out this kind of center area here. So if we just go to mask mode, so I'll just let ZBrush catch up. Oh, you fucking asshole. So if we go into mask mode, make sure you're in mask pen, and then should be able to just paint out again using the radial symmetry. And then what I want you to do now is invert that mask. So to do that, you hold control and just drag. Whoops, that's not what you do. You hold control and you click, and that will left click, and that will invert the mask. And then if you come down to our deformation tab here and just inflate that area out. So to be fair, I think that should do it. So we'll clear our mask, this time again holding Control and just doing a selection like so. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is look at having a couple of kind of bolts around here. So we'll turn off Radial Symmetry and we'll activate, I think maybe Y and X. Okay, so you can see we've got two there, so we're not quite right. There we go, so that's right. So maybe if we, turn off Y. So if we just have X and Y, you can see we're going to be able to create a bolt here and have kind of all four appearing around there. So we'll stay in the standard brush and we'll just kind of click like so to create. And you'll see now we have those four in there. But what we want to do now is actually flatten each of these off. So if we just come into mask mode and just mask kind of around all those. You could use radial mask. Oops. You could use radial mask to do this if you find it easier. That should do. And then we'll hit hide point. So we just have those. And then I want you to use the clip Rect tool. And to remember to do that, you hold Control and Shift and then drag. Then you'll want to press Alt as well to minus off that top bit. Now if it breaks or doesn't work, try the clip curve brush instead. And obviously with this, remember that you need the gradient to be pointing up. Okay, so that's much better. We've now got a kind of flat surface on top of those. So we'll reveal all our points again and just clear the mask. So the only other thing we want to do is kind of have something going on in here. So let's just, for the sake of argument, we'll use the standard brush. And I want you to select your stroke tab here and just drag that off. Then drag it from up here down to here. We'll turn on lazy mouse and we'll turn on backtrack, snap to track and line. Oops, and we better turn off symmetry as well. Okay, it's going to work okay. So we'll go to Z sub. Notice which click and drag and then move back along that line just to make kind of indent in this in the model here. If you think it's too high, just come here and just reduce the intensity down a bit. Let's have a play with the focal shift as well to try and remove that kind of banding effect that was happening. And there we go, we should be able to get a nice kind of indent in there. Okay, so we've got something now that we can, in theory, use as an alpha now. Okay, so to make this into an actual usable alpha, the first thing you basically take ZBrush does like a little render of your actual document. So the first thing we actually need to do is actually set our document size. So make sure constrain proportions is turned off, and then we'll set this to 512 by 512 and then just hit resize. Now you see it will stretch out your object here, so if you just press Ctrl N to make a new document and then just click and drag in the view press T to go to edit mode. Then you can use Shift to actually, well, in fact, just Shift to snap it down when you're moving about in the view, and then F to frame. You should have your alpha kind of nicely framed like that. Okay, so if you look up here, you'll see we actually have an alpha menu. What I want you to do is actually pull that off again. Yeah, just pull that off and then drop it in this menu here. So we're going to need this one for a bit. So the first thing to do is to hit grab dock here. And you should find that it actually just grabs you an alpha like that. If you find that shouldn't be any issues with that, to be honest. But if you do find there's any issues with it, because I seem to remember at some point, maybe if I turn that and do grab dock, I seem to remember it having some lighting baked in at some point, but it's not here. Just try tweaking these options around here. Okay, so now we actually have an alpha that we can use. So let's press comma here. Well, in fact, the first thing we'll do is make our document nice and big again. So we'll just say 3000 by 2000 and hit resize. Then Control N, and just in Tool, just use standard kind of polysphere and T for edit. Okay, so we'll select our alpha. And we will just do exactly what we did before. We'll use drag dot here on our standard brush. And obviously we need to subdivide this mesh a few times. Okay, so if you just try clicking and dragging on your model, you should see the brush we've created come in. So you could try and increase the intensity. In fact, let's try and increase that high because there's a couple of things I want to show you with this. So you'll notice that what's happening is it's actually kind of fading out already, and that's not because of the sphere, that's because of the focal shift up here. So if we just put the focal shift down to say -99 and try dragging, you'll see it will maintain the shape. Obviously now we need to reduce our intensity a bit, and you can see that's much better. So that's the first problem. If you find you're still having a problem with that, you can come up to here and you can reset all brushes, and that will put your standard brush back and then set these up. Okay, the next thing, a little thing to point out with drag rect, is you can notice its orientation is defined by where I've got the mouse. So if you want to have that kind of centre bit pointing in a certain direction, and if you just try drag dot, it's the same with that. Whichever direction you're pulling in will orientate the alpha. In fact, what you can do is you can even, in your alpha settings here, you can rotate the alpha as you want, so kind of ease of placement. Obviously a good thing about drag dot is if you're placing a kind of bunch of these, then you can kind of make them all the same size. Now obviously the other problem we have is this border that's kind of going round it at the moment. So how do we go about fixing that? So we'll just make it a bit bigger. This is why we kind of need the alpha tab up here, because we're going to need, well, there's always a kind of couple of things to fix with this. Now really it's this mid-value range here. And really this is a case of trial and error. So if I just try, say, putting this up to 18, you'll see it's indented. So we already know then that this is a value between 0 and 18. So, well, sorry, between 0 and 21. So if I just try setting this to 12, It's still indented, so I need to go a bit lower, so let's try 5. It's a bit too high, so we'll try 7. And there we go, we've got it pretty much kind of spot on there. And this is actually why, because sometimes this won't kind of hit quite right, so although we've got it right there, I just want to show you another little thing you can do. This is why I was saying try and make sure you've got a border around it like this, because you can actually blur that out. And to do that you can use the Radial Fade here. We'll just try setting that to 1. That will fade out. So let's try putting our mid value back up to say 15. And we can see you can actually get a nice little extra indentation. I'll put the Radial Fade back down to there. And there we have our stamp. So other useful little things you can do, in this case we can use the Radial Symmetry to actually kind of place sets of these if we wanted to. Right, so there's all kinds of useful little tricks. So stamps are kind of really useful for this kind of thing. So one last little thing I wanted to show you with this, when you are actually making stamps, is with this mid value here. If you make a stamp, as we did here, and you have an area of the stamp that's actually lower than the initial plane, so I'll just show you what I mean. If I just go to, I'll just remake this plane, divide this a couple of times, let's say. So if we just use a standard brush here, we'll turn off the alpha. We'll use kind of Radial Symmetry again. Let's say. So if I had something like that, but then did something like this too, then you can see I actually have an indent to this plane now. And this is where this intense mid-value comes in so important, because the mid-value it's looking for is where this plane is exactly sitting. So it's very important to know about this mid-value when you start to kind of make ones like this, where you've got a lot kind of where you've actually got indentations and bits that poke out from your mesh. Okay, so yeah, I think that just about covers it for the stamps for now. One last little thing I just want to show you is actually saving out the brush presets. So let's just redo everything on this one. So reset our document size, create a new document with Control N, click and drag, and then hold Shift, Control N, T for edit, click and drag to flatten it off, and F to frame. Then on alpha, if we go grab doc, you'll see we have our alpha there. We'll just set this to drag dot here, And let's just say we set everything up here. If we go save as, we can call this stamp 1, and then you can load that anytime you would like. And you can also do the same with alphas. So if you wanted to export that specific alpha, you could export it here and just kind of grab it like so. So yeah, nice and easy, because obviously it's not going to save everything that you do in uni as well, so it's worth setting that up.